Yeah, I'm Kyle Winterbottom, founder of Orbition Group. Oh, there you are, Catherine. I can see you now.
Now I can see you.
Founder of Orbition Group. We're a talent solutions business that operates exclusively within the world of data and analytics. We work across the UK, Central Europe and USA. And I guess what we do day to day is help organizations build and scale their data analytics capabilities and organizations. So a little bit different to traditional recruitment and a little bit different to executive search, but we kind of land somewhere in the middle of that, usually doing helping businesses to build their teams at scale. So that could be hiring 10 people immediately. It could be putting a strategy together to help a business in hyper growth within data analytics to hire 50 people over the next 12 months, for example. Outside of that, we're very active in the community. So we host a series of events that take place every quarter in various parts of the world. We have our own podcast, which somehow has managed to get over 13,000 different countries as of the last couple of weeks. So appreciate everyone that tunes into that. And then we're involved in a few kind of initiatives in terms of mentorship and kind of university programs and things like that.
Now I've got to ask you before I ask any questions from these guys, which is great questions coming in here, and thank you. How did you start getting into this? Because it's a relatively new sort of recruitment market from my traditional days 20 years ago. What led you on the path? What piqued your interest?
So, I mean, I started out, I don't think anyone that works in the talent / recruitment landscape, grows up wanting to be a recruiter. Just so happened to fall into that line of work. And I guess my starting point was in the realms of business intelligence, which, I guess has evolved into today is what we now know as kind of data and analytics. Obviously, it was very technically focused then. A lot of business intelligence was still kind of seen as IT, and I'm sure we'll touch upon that in a little while. But so I've kind of always been in and around this space, and then I guess as the market has evolved, so has probably my presence in this market, and I've just hung on for dear life, so to speak.
Well, at least they let you out the cupboard and in front of the camera.
Yeah, sometimes. Yeah,
I've got visions of you being stuck in there with a headset on and loaded with data.
Yeah, I think the world's changed a little bit, but it's a pretty accurate description from about 12 years ago for sure. Yeah.
Oh, brilliant. Well, I'll tell you what, I'm going to start with the first question because we've already had a quick chat before. I am slightly nervous with your answers. Don't be too controversial because I'll have to deal with the chat going on if you do.
Yeah, I'll try my best.
Try your best. So let's start with the first question that we got from our YouTube channel. Expectation versus reality. How is it with the data science job market?
Oh, God. You should have started with a different question if you didn't want controversy, Catherine. So I'm only joking.
To go on.
So expectation versus reality. So I think with this, we've been on a bit of a journey, right, over the last 5 years in particular. So if I think about 5 years ago, all the rage was data science. Data science teams were being built left, right, and center by seemingly every organization under the sun. And, there's nothing wrong with that per se in the grand scheme of things. I think what has happened over those 5 years is there's been probably not as much value added to the business as those business leaders were hoping for by spinning up those data science teams. And look, my opinion, no fault of the data scientists or the data science teams themselves in any way, shape or form in this.
Thank you for saying that. Thank you.
I saved you there, didn't I? But I think we then kind of got to this point, right? The sexiest job title of the 21st century and all of that type of stuff. And I think that led to a lot of people starting to study data science and, really wanting to get into it. And I completely get why. I think most businesses, if I'm honest, weren't ready for data science. And now we're in a situation where the data science part of the market in particular is, probably saturated with people looking to get into it versus the number of organizations looking specifically to recruit at that level.
Why would you have said a company wasn't ready for data science?
Well, just simple little things, right? So I think, as with anything, you have trends that emerge, right? You have these buzzwords that pop up. Artificial intelligence, machine learning, data science was one of them, earlier on. And every business, I think, with the right intention, wanted to do data science. They'd probably not done enough behind the scenes to understand whether they were ready to do that, in terms of, a data scientist's output is only as valid as the data that they have access to, that they can source, the cleanliness of it, the quality of it, et cetera, et cetera. And I think many businesses, their starting point was, they'd not invested heavily at all into data in its entirety.
They didn't have the right raw data to put a data scientist onto.
Yeah. So, and what happened from there was that, we found many people, data scientists, would go into an organization, realize, actually, I'm spending all of my time sifting around trying to find anything useful. So there was this kind of dual challenge going on, where the business wasn't necessarily always fully aware of why they were doing it, right? They wanted to do data science because, I guess, A, it was considered cool, and B, they thought it was going to be a silver bullet. Couple that with the fact then that, not every business had the access to the right data, the right quality of data, the whole adage of garbage in, garbage out, and the other variations of that sentiment. It's
careful, careful,
yeah,
recorded, streaming live.
Yeah, we landed in a place where, the value that the business saw from that wasn't necessarily what they were hoping or expecting for. So, and couple that with the sexiest job of the 21st century, that led a big spike in people trying to get into the industry.
That's why I got into it.
Yeah. So yeah, no, and I think it's one of them, right? It's one of those instances now where businesses are kind of retrospectively looking to fix some of those issues that I mentioned, and therefore, unless they're a gigantic organization that has the time to wait. The flip side of that is, obviously, data scientists also got really bored and fed up, because they want to be in there building algorithms and models, right, that add serious weight and impact to the business that they're working for. But when they're spending 80-90% of the time finding and cleaning data, that's not really what they were hoping for when they got into the industry, right?
No. Do you think they actually understand, not the data scientists, but the companies employing them? Do you think they actually understand what they want the output to be and what it actually looks like that they're trying to get to? I often wonder that myself.
I think obviously that's, case by case basis. I think if I was speaking broadly, now, yes, but that's because they've invested so much money that they can't backtrack, right? So they've had to figure that out. I think at the time, businesses that started, we're going to be data driven, started with data science. Obviously, that's the wrong place to start, probably, and therefore, I don't think they were driven by what is the business objective, how can this add weight to and value to what we're trying to achieve. Are we ready for it? All of that type of stuff. I think it was a starting point out of, a few different things: fear of missing out, obligation, right? Everyone was talking about data science and artificial intelligence. And I think a lot of business leaders thought, well, this could be interesting. And also we don't want to look like we're not the cool kids on the block. If we're not seen to be doing something in this, then employers will go elsewhere because they'll think other businesses are more innovative or cutting edge, or, whatever adage you want to use.
I'm not understanding the financial benefits of what they're actually trying to do. I mean, there's great financial benefits in this kind of work, but it's not so easy to quantify it in the way you want to. I mean, that graph you put up on LinkedIn yesterday was just a perfect example of where spend goes and where it should go.
Yeah.
I like that.
I mean, it's interesting, right? And I'm sure we'll probably get into this a bit further later on, but, I think that an organization's two biggest assets are people first, and then data second. And if they can get both of those components right, they're onto a winner. But in most instances, they're probably the things that get the least time and attention, which is, it fascinates me because, and I know that we're going to talk about the strategy around talent in a little while, I'm sure, but, most businesses, if we were to say, what is your business strategy? They'd say, right, well, here's the end goal and we'll work backwards. Yet for the people element, they don't do that, which has always fascinated me. Always fascinated.
Do you think that's because there was a very big push to promote from within a business, when actually not, although you could have a fantastic person in their job role, maybe that isn't actually the right promotion for them. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think, look, there's so many variables to that, right? And we've also got to remember data science specifically. Obviously we get into the debate around, data science is just linear regression from 25 years ago, right? And I kind of get all of that. But data science as a coined term and a marketplace and a job title has really only been around, 6, 7, 8, 10 years maybe, right? So there's also the fact that, yes, there's a big part of this that, we're in a talent short space in certain instances, but so the retraining of people is massively important. But equally, there's not a lot. When a business started, working with data, they probably didn't have people employed to do that job first, right? So of course there's a natural reaction to having to go and find people with the right skill sets. So it's a tough one to kind of get right, for sure. Okay,
no, that's fair enough. I'm looking at the questions. Something's rewinding. Not sure what that's about. Never mind. Right, there's another one that we had for you. There is a high demand for data professionals, yet most companies are still struggling to kick off their data science projects after hiring the most expensive talents. Why is there such a gap between demand and outcomes? Which we've kind of just touched on there, but that's digging in a little bit deeper.
Yeah. So I've been very vocal about this over the years, but I remember.
You've been vocal, Kyle?
I remember.
A little wallflower.
Probably. Yeah. Well, someone's got to, I guess. But if I rewind 5 years, I remember sitting in on multiple meetings with, hiring managers and business leaders who were saying, right, we're going to build a data science team. And I would ask them to talk me through why. And 9 times out of 10, what they were trying to do didn't require a data scientist, right? So we had again the fear of missing out, a bit of obligation. I'm not too sure. There's probably various factors, and I don't think anything. I don't think any business leader was out there saying, we're going to say we do data science, but we actually won't. I think it came from a place of good intent, but probably just, you don't know what you don't know, a lack of knowledge and understanding at that time, especially, 5 years ago, it was a little bit newer than it is today. And then, as we said before, right, so they would go and hire data scientists to do the job of, and pay through the nose for these people, right? What they might have needed is a strong analyst, and they would go and pay 20, 30K a year more to hire a data scientist who would invariably leave after a few months because they're saying, well, this isn't what I signed up for, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's tough, and we could.
I suppose within your workspace, you've got a lot of a job of educating the client as to what the candidate needs to look like, rather than what they think they want. Would you agree with that?
100%, absolutely. Because I think, you get this situation where, the business wants to go in a direction, and therefore, often it's sometimes a kind of knee-jerk reaction to, and the amount of times I've seen it, not just in data science, but across the whole data landscape in general, right? It starts with, right, we want to be a data-driven company from here on out, and they put the flag in the sand, and their first port of call is to go and buy a data lake and build something, and it's like, well, why? Why are you trying to, not saying that's not important and it's not going to be necessary, but it doesn't necessarily need to be the first port of call. And it's almost like where many businesses, they know they want to do it. They know there's great value in doing it somewhere. They're not too sure how to extract that value. So they kind of like, right, okay, the first iteration of this strategy is we'll build a data lake. And then, the 2 million quid down, hired all these people, and that, right, now what do we do? And then it's a case of, actually, we're not too sure, or that might have not been the right bit of kit, or, we've got all of these data scientists and engineers that we actually don't need, you know what I mean? So it's a tricky landscape. And I think I've spent a lot of time, probably counterintuitively to myself over the years, saying to someone like, look, you don't need to pay 90 grand for that. What you're after is someone, that can do the job that's 50 grand. Yeah, they don't have the title, but it's not about that per se. Yeah. And I've had several people say to me, you're the only kind of recruitment/talent person that's ever told me not to hire someone. Why, when you're going to make money from this? And I'm like, but my vision and purpose beyond this is like, I think we need to, the more we speak about this stuff as a collective, as an industry, the better we become. And ultimately, the better we all become, the better everyone does out of it. So, and the flip side of that is, yes, we could place a data scientist in a role. If they leave within 3 months, what have we done, right? Ruined someone's life potentially. The business has probably wasted a lot of money, and everyone's in a worse off position, right? So I think we've kind of got an obligation and a duty of care to, try and educate and do the right things. Now, by no means am I an expert in this. There's a lot more very credible people than me, but all I can do is give them the steer on the market, the types of jobs out there, the types of people, the rough costs, just what to expect, I guess, because that's where most businesses just don't really understand the landscape.
Yeah, I can understand that. I mean, there's new titles coming out all the time that I don't actually know what it means or in anything.
Yeah. I mean, there's some, funky titles out there now, right, that aren't necessarily technical roles. So, you've got the translator, the storyteller, the data journalist, the, X, Y, and Z. And it's kind of like, okay, well, I kind of get that. I think we just got to be very careful. We're doing it out of a place of good intention. But, with every new title we throw out there, there's a spike in hype around something, you know what I mean? Yeah. So I think we've just got to be careful in terms of how we coin certain things. And for me, top and tail, sand, line in the sand, it's all about balance. Like any team needs to have a balance of skills, including, soft skills, commercial skills, hard technical skills. There's no one size fits all approach. And I think back to the data science piece, that's where many businesses started and failed, was that they'd spin up a team of data scientists that had 15-20 people in it, but there's no engineers, right? And it's kind of like, well, none of these data scientists were either willing or able to get the data and move it to where it needed to be. Okay, so that and then we get into the realm of the rise of the data engineer over the last 2 years. The data engineer now is that role. That's probably the sexiest role of the 21st century, right? So it's there's always going to be movement. I think that's the important thing, but it's about getting the balance right.
I think there needs to be movement as well, especially in this industry. If you stay still, you're going to miss the boat to a large degree. I'll just say now to our LinkedIn watchers, do feel free to comment and post your questions. The YouTube watchers are doing more questions than you, so you need to catch up.
Yeah, so create some internal competition here. Yeah,
exactly. Okay, I'll do you another one, Kyle. What are some red flags candidates need to look out for when approached for a data leadership role?
Oh, right. This is my sweet spot, I think now. So I think there's a few things. Like, first of all, I think what needs to be understood is that there's, at the leadership level, there are so many variables that come into play for someone to think whether an opportunity is right for them or not, right? So I guess if you think about, but at the practitioner level, people trying to get into the industry, people in the middle of their kind of hands-on careers, for them, often it's driven by, am I using the latest and greatest technologies? How much are you going to pay me? Can I work from home? Is it a cool company? And am I working on cool projects, right? At the leadership level, I think there's a lot more to it than that, because it starts to become about, okay, who do I report to? Where do I sit within an organization? Because that plays a part in how influential I can be. Have I got any budget? Or, am I coming in as a one-man band and you're expecting me to be an entire team? The package has got to be right, the location, the hybrid working, the travel, the technology stacks, the ability to change and influence and transform and all of that type of stuff. So I think there's many variables. I think obviously,
is there a particular though, like real red flag that if a company was to say that to you as a candidate, you would think, no, they've got this wrong?
Honestly, I think most businesses get this wrong. So my party line on this is that the facts are, if you think about data leadership people, all of them are now pining for the chief data officer role, right? In the UK, there are a handful of true chief data officer roles that sit on the board, report to a CEO, that are paid at executive level, etc. The rest of them are just, probably inflated job titles, rightly or wrongly, right? And I completely get why people want the title, because it's seen as the pinnacle, right? Like who wouldn't want that? But I think that the big standout things are, and most businesses get this wrong, because I don't know why. I think they still think this, they can't separate IT and data often, right? So they kind of think the most senior data person, the person that's going to lead our capability, needs to be the most technically inclined, like needs to be the absolute whiz. So, and you get into instances where then you have, we're looking for a CDO, or we're looking for a director of data analytics, and the requirements are a shopping list of technology. It's 15 years Python, and it's like, well, that should be a red flag for most people. That's not to say that every business needs someone that's not focused on technology, because obviously there's certain instances where the leader probably does need to be a lot more hands-on. Like if they're a startup, for example, and it's about building a product, that's going to go to market, fine. But if you're talking about other organizations, the value add that these people add is, influencing, storytelling, communication, winning hearts and minds, taking people on that journey. Like, how are you going to transform the business from where it is to where it wants to get to using data and analytics? And the technology is massively important. It's the vehicle that allows us to do the do often, but it's not the be all and end all. So I think that's probably the big red flag when you see, for a lot of data leaders, when you see the job descriptions, that are just pure technology. That'd be the big thing for me. And I don't know whether you're still there or not, Catherine. Take that as a no. Oh, here's Ben to the rescue.
Hey, Kyle. Good to see you. Hey, everybody on LinkedIn here. I'm just going to back up Catherine here while she's out. So as soon as she comes back, I'll let her take over. So Ben Cutler here with Winpeer. Kyle, having a great conversation today. Really appreciate you joining. Hope this is really useful for everyone on LinkedIn. It looks like we've got about 20 people joining us live from LinkedIn at this point. So LinkedIn, really appreciate you joining today. I'd love to see some more questions. Kyle, I haven't really seen too many live questions yet, so I'd love to take some live questions here. We've got a series of questions queued up, so we can keep on with the written questions that we have here. Some of the questions we've taken prior to the interview today, but again, LinkedIn, I'm just going to throw this invitation out there. We'd love to get some live questions. We've got people in different industries joining today, people in analytics and business development, marketing, many other different business departments that way. So it looks like Catherine's back. So Catherine, I'm going to let you take over here.
Thank you. And I do apologize for that, guys. As I'd explained to Kyle, I live down in Spain, and we've had some pretty nasty wildfires down here, which means the electricity keeps jumping off. And therefore, my colleague, Ben, very kindly has been sitting in the background in case it happened. And of course, it did happen. So, well, it had to, didn't it? If we're going to have a day like that, it's just going to happen. Where were you up to, Kyle? I don't think you'd actually finished that question.
Yeah, I think I was just kind of freestyling at the end there, but I was kind of saying to answer the question, the red flags for in my eyes for most data leaders ought to be, if the role is purely about technology, because ultimately there's a few facets to that. Are you going to have the ability and authority that you need to truly influence the organization to kind of move the needle from where they are to where they need to be, and transform the business in terms of its business objectives and strategy to, by using data and analytics. And I think, as I mentioned, most businesses get that wrong. They think that this leader ought to be the best player as well, to use a football analogy. Very often not the best footballers make the best managers, right? So it's not any different. The job is The job is to kind of, build the team, motivate the team, deliver value back to the business, take the business on the journey. Is a lot more about the soft, soft in quotation marks, because there's nothing soft about them. They're very difficult to master, but more about the kind of soft strategic and commercial skills. Of course, they need to have an aptitude and experience, I guess, from a technical perspective, because ultimately they'll be managing people in that domain. But do they need to be the one sitting there writing the code? I think if that's what the business is asking, they're trying to hire the wrong type of person.
Yeah, I can understand that completely. I've lost my other screen because I'm actually now on battery power. Ben, perhaps I can add you and you can go through, because you can see the other questions from the sheet on the YouTube channel. Joy of joys with me today.
Serves you right for living
my battery will probably die as well, just to add to the power cut.
please don't do that.
Hotspotting off my phone, useful. Sorry, Ben, do you want to take over?
Yeah, absolutely. What question are you on here, Catherine? Help me out.
We were just asking, what was the last question I asked you, Kyle?
About the red flags for data leadership roles.
That's right. There you go.
I'm with you here.
Yeah, you're on the ball.
So again, I'm just going to throw this invitation out there. LinkedIn, we'd love to take some questions here today. So again, we've got a lot of questions queued up, and we'll keep this going. Having a great time, getting some great insight from Kyle. Thank you for joining today. But again, we'd love to see some questions here. Looks like we've got one. So TG, thank you very much for the question. LinkedIn Live, please keep them coming. The question here from TG is, Kyle, you mentioned being a one-person team. What is a tipping point to accept a role that is not clear from conversation?
It's a very good question. What I would say, TG, is if it's not clear, then you need to be making sure that you ask the question first and foremost. That would be my advice. If you're speaking to an organization that wants to bring you on board, even at the entry level for that starting their data and analytics journey, I guess the question becomes, even if you are very technically inclined and that's going to be the bulk of the role, how long do you want to be playing that role for? And, do you have the scope and the backing of the business and, the budget to grow and invest? Because otherwise it can become a pretty frustrating place. So I think two parts to that. Obviously, first of all, try to understand and go back and ask the question. If it's not clear, what is the scope of this role? What are you expecting beyond just hiring me? And that should then start to uncover some of the information that you need. I guess my advice would always be, don't accept a role if something's not clear, because you're probably setting yourself up for failure, if I'm being brutally honest.
Yeah, it's really great, Kyle, and thanks for your response. Really appreciate the kind of the personalized response to that question. TG, thank you very much for the question. And again, LinkedIn Live, please keep the questions coming. Hiring managers, you're looking to put together a strategy. You've got questions about the right roles, the right skills, the right approach, pitfalls, things like that. Other folks out there that have questions to share with Kyle here today, please keep the questions coming. This will really keep it interesting and useful for everyone on the live stream today. Kyle, the next question that I see here that we do have queued up, what are the key skills companies look for in a data leader role, and do you think those skills are justified?
So I guess that ties into my response to the previous question a little bit. So I think what they, generally speaking, not in all instances, but I'd say, probably 80-90% of the time, the skills that they do look for versus the skills that they need are probably different, right? So again, most businesses still, for some reason, think that because this person is the most senior within the data analytics sphere, and they struggle to separate or segregate data from technology, they think that this person needs to be the technical whiz, can code in all these languages, can build models and dashboards and all of this stuff. And I'm sure for many people, once upon a time, they could, right? But I guess what in most instances, the role of that person should be about, trying to add value back to the business. And I think there's a big gray area in our industry where people don't like to talk about the fact that, business leaders are investing in this because they expect something in return, right? So as with any investment they make, when they're building a team, when they're buying technology, whatever the case may be, they're expecting them to become a better business for it. Now, obviously, that's very difficult sometimes to be able to say, the work of my team as a data leader has resulted in X amount millions of pounds, because sometimes there are internal power struggles, allocation. If you do a big project for a sales team and the sales team then, bring in another 10 million pound, dollars, euros, whatever the case may be. Well, of course, it's not always as plain sailing to say, well, it's split 50-50 or it's weighted this way or that way. Of course, the sales team want the credit for the 10 million that they've brought in, right? So you get these power struggles that happen, and therefore it's not as easy as everyone says to go, what I did resulted in an uplift of X or Y. But ultimately, that's the job, right? That's what we need to get to justify, for data leaders to continue to justify their existence, and or then continue to get budget to keep growing their teams and capability to do bigger, better projects. So it's like any investment. As soon as the value and the return is there, you get more investment to do bigger and better stuff, right? And I think it's the exact same thing here. But the important skills to do that aren't often around the technology. Like the data leader, typically should go and be able to go and employ the people that can, do the architecture, that can do the engineering, that can do the data science. Like that's not or shouldn't be their job. Some instances, yes, but often no. So their job becomes, being the cheerleader almost, right? So constructing the team, putting the best people possible in the best seats for the business, making sure that they're kind of getting some commercial value from the projects that they're driving, winning hearts and minds, taking the business on that journey, telling the story, raising the profile, influencing, persuading, all of that type of good stuff. So I think, and that is ultimately, in my eyes, the bottom line where most businesses get it wrong. They still focus on, well, how long have you coded in Python? And my question often is, why does that matter? Because when push comes to shove and they're in the role, they'll hire someone that can code in Python and has done for 10 years, right? So I think it's those commercial and strategic skills. And I think the biggest thing, if you then look at the people that go on and do really well in the industry from a data leadership perspective, it comes down to execution and transformation. Like most people at this, at the data leadership level are all very capable of writing a very convincing data strategy. It's the people that go and execute, get it into the business, get it working and get value out of the other side of it that helps that business to transform in some way, shape or form. And it's them people that typically rise to the top pretty quickly.
Cool. I'm back in the room, guys, until the next power cut. And TG, I saw your first question, which Ben kindly asked. I think TG wants to drill down into that a little bit, Kyle. He's saying you may have answered this. Apologies for the duplication if you have. But in your experience with data-driven companies, on paper at least, and I think that's a good differential as well, on paper, what are some red flags to watch out for the companies that claim to value data teams, but don't give the autonomy or align the team to deliver on company objectives for the quarter or for the year? So I think TG just wants to get a much better idea. If you could drill down a little bit for him.
Yeah, again, another great question and something that we come up with a lot. So I think there's a big debate in the industry about where data teams should sit, right? And everyone's got a different opinion on it. And broadly speaking, it shouldn't really matter, providing you have the right level of autonomy to deliver. Hence the question. What you find is, though, unfortunately, that can sometimes be a kind of leading indicator as to how much autonomy you will actually have and where that business sees your role. So the amount of data teams that I've seen being built, all singing, all dancing, and really all they're after is, a few dashboards to be made to take into a sales meeting at the end of the month or quarter, and it's kind of like it's a waste, right? So I think some of the red flags, reporting lines can be an indicator of that, in my opinion. I think that one of the most obvious things is, can the business or the data leader, because they're typically the person that bridges the gap between data teams and the business leadership, is, do they have a clear, defined strategy as to what they're trying to achieve as a business and how they see the role of data and analytics playing in that? Because I think what you typically find is, if the answer is no, once you get into there and you go to them with your hand out saying, right, it's gonna cost you £2 million for this and blah blah blah, it's very quickly like, it's not quite what we had in mind. And then you're in an instance where, again,
what
business spun up this data team, and they're kind of prohibited to add value because there's kind of almost like a preconception of what this team has been brought in to deliver. And that's not necessarily wrong, but obviously there needs to be a certain level of acknowledgement from the business that they also don't know what they don't know, right? The reason why you hire these people is because they add something to the business that you can't do, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's probably a good starting point. If if you are a data leader and whoever you report into can't answer that question, or if you are a practitioner within a data team and your data leader can't answer that question on behalf of the business leader that he or she reports into, then
that's a pretty red flag.
You might be in trouble.
Yeah. TJ, I hope that answered. I did see another question come through from you, but I'm going to ask the question just before, because I think it'll flow into the next question TJ's got for you. He's taking the most out of it here, Kyle. And I'm not sure how to read this one, but hopefully it'll make sense to you. How to see the relationship with the leader via recruitment. So can this lead to a sustainable relationship with the business? So my understanding of this question is they've come through you, but how do they then get the relationship as to where they want to take the company?
That's a tricky question to answer. So, look, I think obviously there's if that is the way the question's phrased, then there's always benefits to, let's use a data leader as an example, because we've been barking on about that. But, typically speaking, the businesses, for example, that we work with, we have much fewer partnerships, but those partnerships are typically, the relationships are much deeper. We're doing things much more on a strategic level. It's done at scale. So it's less, recruitment probably has a persona of being transactional, right? And that's exactly what it shouldn't be. And it's one of the things I'm very passionate about trying to change within my industry. But I think, if, for example, we place a data leader into an organization, we've typically got a good relationship with the person that we've placed them with. So, for example, we recently placed a director of data and analytics into a FTSE 100 listed business, right? I'm dealing every day with the chief operating officer who this role is going to report to. So if that person had challenges or whatever, I'm sure there's strings that could be pulled for me to kind of, become a bit of a facilitator between conversations on that front. But I think ultimately, look, businesses use businesses like ours because, look, we're a necessary evil, right? If it was easy, they'd do it themselves. It's not easy, so they need a partner. And I don't think we're naive enough to kind of think otherwise. But I guess I
think that actually resonates back to TJ's thanking you for answering his questions on the red flag. And he's also asking, and I think this is exactly what you're kind of saying. How do you, as a recruiter hiring manager, position the value of enterprise data solution architect to an organization that's building their data team from ground up? Because it's very difficult for somebody to go direct to a company, whereas as a recruiter, you obviously want the right candidates coming to you. So how do you position their value? Is there can't be a set way, but, is it difficult for you to do, or are you finding that companies listen because you've got that relationship with them?
I mean, I'd like to think that companies listen. Yeah, A, because we we have that relationship, and B, because we kind of know what we're talking about to some extent. I think, often the exercises that we get involved with an organization is to start again with the objective of the business, what you're trying to achieve. You work backwards, and then that starts to identify gaps within their current team, or if they're building it from scratch, what type of roles they're going to need to get to deliver on what they need to deliver to fuel the business strategy. I guess at that point, breaking it down from there is a case of, as we mentioned earlier, there's many businesses that have gone on the journey by, jumping feet first into data science. And it's kind of like, well, who's architected all of this for you, like your systems and where data flows and how it's going to move? What's the blueprint? So I think, and we're seeing a massive resurgence around some of the more core principles like architecture, like governance and data management, fueled, in my opinion, heavily because most business leaders went on this journey chasing artificial intelligence, spent a lot of money, didn't get much out of it, and then, kind of retrospectively, with their tail between their legs, followed their steps, Hansel and Gretel style, and ended up with, hang on, it's not been architected properly for us to govern our data. We don't know how clean the data is. We don't know how reliable or trustworthy it is, etc., etc. So there's been this big resurgence. So I think the market, TG, hopefully answers your question. The market is kind of auto-correcting itself that the value of these people have is huge, because if you do it right at the front end, it's unfortunate in some ways, because I think I'd love businesses to kind of just stand up and say, architecture and governance and data management, it's important to get right because it's important to get right. Unfortunately, it's become obvious to them it's important to get right, but because it's still an enabler to better analytics. So many businesses now, they're taking these back steps to fix what's, maybe wasn't where it needed to be, or what was broken, or whatever the case may be, on the premise that that's going to allow their analytics or advanced analytics projects to be better, to add more value. But I guess, look, take the kind of peaks and troughs as they come. The architecture space is probably one of the most busiest that we've had in the last 2 years. Our engineering and architecture for sure, and then resurgence around data governance. So I think, obviously we know what we're talking about. It's easy for us to kind of articulate the value that these people can add to a team to make sure they get it right, and what the consequences are if it's not done properly. Unfortunately, we're not involved in every recruitment process in the world, and
why?
Yeah, well, I mean, we should be, exactly, Catherine. That's a great question. But yeah, and I kind of say this quite a lot, but internal recruitment teams have the hardest job in the world, like the hardest job in the world, because bear in mind, I only know what I know because I've been doing this for 12 years every single day, right? So there'd be something wrong if I didn't know that. They, one day are recruiting, I don't know, an accountant. The next day they're recruiting a cleaner. The next day they're recruiting a truck driver. The next day they're trying to recruit, the COO. And then the next day they're trying to recruit a data architect. Like, it's impossible for them to know everything. And when you have those instances play out, which happens day in, day out in every country in the world, they just don't know what to go looking for. They don't know how to position it. They get told what to go.
They get told we need this, but they don't have the background. Yeah,
exactly.
If they need it. Yeah, no, you're right there. And TG just saying he has to ask, which data practitioner helped you draft your data strategy? I get crickets.
Oh God, this. I need to be careful what I say here. So I think, look, there's been.
You promised to behave.
Yeah, I did. No, so there's been. I think, look, as per the infographic that I shared the other day, right, it's obvious that still, for whatever reason, most businesses overinvest in technology and underinvest in data. And I think that specific infographic was very much geared towards, treating data as an asset. Like, data should be looked after, it should be maintained, it should be upkept, blah, blah, blah. That doesn't happen for a variety of reasons. I think it's probably a fair assumption to say that many in our industry probably do blame software vendors, because obviously they are great salespeople and they go in and say, look what our tool can do, and it can do this and it can do that. And often they can, right? That's not That's not to say that these tools aren't important or that they don't add value, because they do, but I guess in silo they don't add value, right? So again, all of this comes back to, I mean, we talk about data strategy, but in my opinion, and I speak a lot about this when I speak to organizations, things like, identifying talent in this day and age, given all the tools we've got, isn't difficult. I say with absolute confidence when I speak to any business leader, right, you tell me what you're going looking for, give me 30 minutes and I'll come back to you with a list of 300 names of people who are right for that job. The difficulty is not identifying who these people are anymore. It's cutting through the noise to get them to engage with you, because the market is so buoyant that they're being reached out to by tons of different companies on a daily basis, right? Mm-hmm. So, and then that conversation then comes into, you've got to create a narrative around why they should even think about answering the phone to you and your organization. Like, why are you different? What is your compelling narrative? What's the message that's going to cut through that noise? And often some of the metrics that I put in there are around, okay, do you even have a data strategy? Because if you do, you're already onto a winner in comparison. What is it? How is that fueling the objectives of the business? All of this type of stuff. So I completely empathize with TG there, that, if they've gone out to look at, get people into what is your data strategy, how have you gone about doing it, etc., etc. It is difficult. And, I think that the message probably is just, be sure to get different advice from different people, because obviously, these businesses want you to buy your tool, right? That's the top and tail of it. And it's not to say that this tool couldn't be the best tool in the world, but ultimately, if you're buying tools without having a data strategy, and then you get into it and you have to build a data strategy, off the back of that, then you're kind of bound to a certain type of tool, and is it the right tool, and all this type of stuff. So it's like anything. And again, back to the start of the conversation, Catherine, it fascinates me why we do this with data and with people. Like, if the business wanted to increase sales by 20% next year, they'd look at metric, they'd look at, right, that's the end goal. How do we get there and work back? Yet with this stuff, sometimes they don't. They go, okay, let's buy this software, then we can evaluate where we are after that. And then they're doing that without any strategy in place.
Yeah. Well, TG, I think the advice is that you need to go and employ Kyle to help you find the best data practitioner for your business. Is that about right, Kyle?
No, yeah, some might say that.
Not a problem. We've got a question here from Ron. Thank you very much for that, TG. Assuming a company wants to start working on building a data talent hiring strategy, what first action point would you recommend to get started?
Great question. Again,
similar to that beginning, isn't it? Where do you?
Absolutely. So and we kind of harp on about this all the time in the industry, right? But it's because it's so obvious. And I think what I see in the market is that most businesses, when they go to recruit, they are doing it very reactively, and that puts them in a position of weakness immediately. So it should start with what we're trying to do as a business. Okay, what role does data play in that? What is the data strategy? For us to fulfill that data strategy, what types of people do we need, over what timescales, what job, what tech stack, what blah, 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 blah. Getting a balanced team, it's all important. And so, just again, as you would with anything, work backwards to the point of, okay, by these dates, we need to have these skills within our business. Okay, and for us to have those skills within our business by these dates, we need to go and start looking now, right? It might take us a month to identify someone. It might take us then a month to get them through the numerous stages of the interview process. You might want to build a bit of fat into there for people taking offers elsewhere or counter offers or whatever the case may be. And then depending upon where you are in the world, there'll be some kind of notice period usually, right? So, and this is the problem that most businesses, they kind of, as they edge towards, let's build a data lake and then we'll assess. And then when they assess, it's like, okay, right now I need three whatever data analysts. Okay, well, people at that level, they're probably going to have a 3-month notice period. It might find you 6 weeks to find and interview them. if you're lucky, right? So therefore you're 4.5 months out without the skills that you need. And then what happens? Okay, you have to go and plug that gap by hiring a consultancy or hiring contractors and, whatever the case may be. So it, again, fascinates me why we don't do that, but most businesses don't. And I personally think it stems from the fact that many get into or onto this journey without a strategy to start with.
Okay. I'm conscious, Carl, that we've only got 7 minutes left because we started the broadcast 2 hours ago. And you didn't miss that. Don't ask me why. It wasn't me, is all I can say. I want to get these last couple of questions in, though.
Yeah.
One word of advice for candidates and one word of advice for companies. Only one. God. I know you can't, but you can.
One. Advice, to be honest, it's probably the same advice, just flipping into the way it's kind of articulated. So I think advice for candidates is that, look, first and foremost, in this market, they are the people in demand, so they hold the cards in most instances, most jobs. So you're in a great place. That's the first thing to say. The first bit of advice, though, is getting under the skin of some of the stuff we've discussed today. Like, is the business truly bought into this? Does it have the appetite? Is it willing to invest? And you find all that stuff by asking, things around who's the data leader, if they're a practitioner, do they have any pedigree in the market? What's the data strategy? Do they have one? What is it? How is that fueling the business strategy? What are the long-term plans? What's the progression? All of that stuff. So it's just about understanding their narrative as to, are they an employer of choice or should they be? Should they be considered an option? The flip side of that is the advice that I always give to companies is that if you are going to market with, putting adverts out there that don't speak to those points, and it's just, we are X, we do Y, we're looking for Z, and here's your list of A to G technology skills that you're looking for. People just not interested, right? They're not. The days of that are long gone. So it's about how do you articulate a compelling message that's going to stop people in their tracks and be interested and intrigued to kind of dig a little bit deeper, I'd say.
So I suppose that would be the same answer to companies then. That's the rule.
Exactly.
Create the strategy.
Both sides, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, we've all seen those interviews come up even on LinkedIn. We're here, we're there. This is what we want. Send us your CV.
The problem is, Catherine, now, and again, conscious of time, but if you rewind 20 years, you talk about things like employer brand, right? And there are very few businesses, in my opinion, in this day and age that have an employer brand that is big enough, good enough to attract people solely by the name of the business. Maybe you start to get into the realms of Google, Amazon, Netflix, right? The big tech players, for example. Gymshark here in the UK do a great job. Like, it's a big success story, so the success of their business, they find it easy to acquire talent because everyone wants to have their name on the CV, right? Yeah. The problem is they equate for 1% of the market, right, in the grand scheme of things. So the other 99% of businesses need to be better at selling themselves, and they don't like that term. They don't like the term like we shouldn't have to sell ourselves. Well, you should. You do have to sell yourself. That's just the reality of the situation now. So yeah. Okay.
Well, as I said, we're running out of time, so we're going to wrap up because I don't want to suddenly cut you off again. I think I've done it 3 times today, so I think I'm
accustomed to that.
Be nice. Let's cut you off again. Carl, I really enjoyed today. Thank you so much for joining us. You've got so much to say. I have a feeling we might be seeing you again soon. Thank you so much to Ben as well, my wonderful American colleague, stepping into the breach while the fires rage around me. Anyway. And thank you to everybody for watching this video. Please do subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can replay the wisdom of Kyle to your heart's content, and also see the webinars we've done before. And we have some more coming up in the future, which are quite exciting too. One of which I know Kyle's going to want to see, but I'm not going to tell him who it is. I'll just leave that one there. But no, we very much appreciate both of your time. And thank you from TG, and thank you. They're all saying thank you very much, Carl. Much appreciated. And we will talk again soon.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Thanks from Wimpure. Bye
Bye.
for now.